Hello and welcome to the Morningscape podcast. I'm Matt Moody, doing a solo effort for this Tuesday slate. We're looking at a pretty monstrous slate, so let's just get right into things. I'll be doing this alone, no Doug, no DJ, so you really get the best of both worlds here. So let's start with the games. We're looking at Arizona at the Islanders, Anaheim at Philadelphia, Edmonton at Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh this weekend. Whew, boy, that was a thrashing at the hands of the Lightning. So, be interesting to see how they respond to that one against McDavid. We got Tampa at Carolina, like I just said. Ooh boy, Tampa. Detroit at Buffalo. Florida at Montreal. LA on a back-to-back after playing Toronto on this lovely Monday evening at Ottawa. And Calgary at Nashville, Vancouver at Minnesota, Dallas at Colorado, and Chicago at the Vegas Golden Knights. So let's start with the first game of the night, Arizona at the Islanders. Arizona's kicking off their yearly New York City trip, playing the Islanders, Rangers, and Devils in a very tight window. Um, it's kind of, I guess, the really cool thing that happened this week was Clayton Keller, obviously, kind of. I mean, he'd already broken out, but I mean, Jesus, he has been phenomenal for them. And going up against an Islanders team that they've been good, but I think you're going to get Keller at a price where he's still relatively playable. I know specifically for me on fantasy draft, he's been a center, so that just makes him inherently more valuable. But he is at 6 shot attempts per game over the last 4 games, and he is just putting up big numbers left and right. It's kind of a nice replacement because Ekman Larson, as much as I loved him to start the year, he has been a disappointment. Really, kind of not terrible, but just uninvolved in a daily fantasy perspective. So kind of picking up where he left off last year, which is not what we wanted to see. And if you're looking for a cheap D on the Arizona side, I like Jason Demers a little bit. If you're trying to stack or something, he's been playing on that power play one with Ekman Larson and Keller and the first line for Arizona. So he's viable, and he also has somewhere in the neighborhood of 6 shot attempts per game over the last 10 days. So it's a very blah spot for me on the Arizona side. Similarly, I think people are going to look at the Islanders and kind of just want to play them. For me, I don't necessarily love it. We're getting to the point where I feel comfortable drawing from this season's sample, and so to this point, if you look at the expected goals, and I adjust it for like an above average metric, so essentially if a team's averaging 3 expected goals given up per game and you get 3.5 in that game, you'll get a 0.5 bonus, kind of. So it kind of rewards you for beating up on better teams rather than just picking on bad teams. So anyways, if you look at how the Islanders have been playing and the Arizona is probably why you'd want to target them anyways, because they're just bad defensively. Nothing really stands out here. They're right in the middle of the pack at around 2.5 expected goals for per 60. And, that's not all that exciting when there's top end centers that really make Tavares look like a lesser play and no one else that really dominates usage. I know, one of my pet players is Ryan Pulak. He has been basically relegated into a power play only role, which is it's it's disappointing, honestly. Like I think I think he's more deserving of that. And so from a daily fantasy side, even though he's on the power play one, I just think he's a little bit too risky, especially on such a huge slate. Like I would be fine with taking a flyer on him if it were, the Monday slate where it's a 2 gamer and you're like, he's probably not going to be all that owned. Like people probably know about him at this point. But it's not like he's scored yet. Um, so here I'm just looking to pass on the Islanders entirely. As I mentioned, I think there's other centers that really make Tavares not quite as valuable on this slate, and no one else really stands out to me in terms of their usage and daily fantasy upside. So let's go on to the next game. We have the Ducks at the Flyers. So might be seeing yours truly head over to that game, but that's yet to be seen. The Ducks are slowly rounding back into shape. They are getting Hampus Lindholm back, along with Ryan Getzlaf will play. Hopefully he's 100% this time, as it seems like they rushed him back a little bit too soon. So with that said, Cam Fowler went down for the Ducks in their most recent game, which, it sucks. Don't get me wrong, Fowler is a fine player, but I don't think he's as irreplaceable as someone like Lindholm was, and obviously someone like Ryan Getzlaf, who's their franchise cornerstone center. So I like the value here in this game. As of Monday's practice, we saw Brandon Montour, the one and only true GOAT, played on the first power play unit along with Getzlaf. He joined Raquel, obviously, and then Corey Perry and Andre Kasha on that first unit. Kasha's a really skilled player. I would attribute his game more like a playmaker than an absolute, sniper of sorts. But he is absolutely has offensive upside, and a duck stack here just sits really well with me. Even though the Ducks have been super banged up and they haven't played that well, I still have them projected as a top 5 matchup on the slate. And that doesn't take into account like their daily fantasy salaries and guys like Montour, low 4Ks. Like, that's, give me a break. He's been smashing that without power play one time and without being, the featured defenseman offensively. And now with Fowler out, he's going to really step up. And Lindholm's going to play his normal 23 to 24 minutes per Randy Carlyle. But I still think Montour is going to get his 20. He's going to be used in the offensive clutch situations. And if it gets down to it, crunch time, like, I think Montour will be out there. So I love him as a play, even though his price is steadily increasing. And then Kasha's worth a dart throw. Raquel and Getzlaf, I think, are a bit too expensive to be cash viable, but absolutely in tournaments, I have no issue with it. I'm not sure where Kasha's lining up at 5-on-5. That information was not out at the time of recording, so keep an eye on Morning Skate tomorrow, and that'll be, I think, the main GPP stack that you would want. Kasha, if he's on the first 2 lines with one of Getzlaf or Raquel, along with Brandon Montour. So from there, we go to the Philly side. We saw Andrew McDonald is out for the foreseeable future, and so this kind of changes up things for Philly defensively. McDonald, argue all you want, like, he's not good. Like, he might be decent, he might be just terrible. Like, we don't really know. But he'd been playing well to begin this season, and losing him really, it kind of throws things. They're putting rookies up in really big time situations, guys like Sanheim and Robert Haig. Haig will be paired up with Ivan Provorov, which I don't have much interest in Haig, even if he's playing 20, 21, 22 minutes. He's kind of more of the Pulock-esque dart throw. As an example, on this Monday slate, it is about 7 o'clock, so the game hasn't started yet, but I am playing Roman Polak in my tournament team, which just, shoot me. But, sometimes you just got to take a dart throw on guys like that. So with him being relatively cheap, if you absolutely need the savings, I think I would prefer him. But, you look at his AHL numbers, and he had something less than 2 shots per game, and he picked up 15 points in 58 games as a 21-year-old in the AHL. Certainly nothing to write home about here. So, and then lastly, I know Doug would want me to mention Jakub Voracek. I mean, he's, say what, joking aside, like, Voracek has been an incredible play. And he hasn't even scored yet. Like, this Philly team is explosive, and that power play is legit good. I don't love targeting Anaheim, especially now that, like I said, they're getting Getzlaf and they're getting Lindholm back, which I think well outweigh the loss of Cam Fowler. And Voracek just keeps shooting. He has over 5 shot attempts per game, and he hasn't scored. He has a ridiculous amount of assists, but the goals have not come. So, if you believe in any sort of regression, like, sure, the assists should level out, but I mean, so should the goals. And in daily fantasy, goals are worth more than assists. So, um, his price is a bit on the rise. So, not a lock by any means, but I think with some of the normal suspects like Hoffman, uh, getting slight increases that kind of cut in their value, Voracek is a relatively fine play. So looking at Edmonton at Pittsburgh, Draisaitl looks like he will return. There's no word on the lines for Edmonton. Um, so keeping that in mind, Yamamoto has been incredible. I'm so glad that he kind of got over whatever caused McClellan to play him for 6 minutes on opening night, because that was just a supreme disappointment. Um, so Yamamoto just keeps shooting. He's putting up the numbers, and Edmonton is getting super duper unlucky. So when you combine the fact that Edmonton is getting super duper unlucky while dominating play, and Pittsburgh is just horrendous defensively. I mean, that was my fear going into the season. I've said it over and over again. Like, I love to target Pittsburgh, and in a spot where people might shy away from Edmonton, even though they've arguably turned it around a little bit as of late, picking up points in a few games in a row. But there's just not a huge reason for me to tell you, even if Yamamoto's, he's up in that high mid range, I would say, and he's still well worth the play just because he is playing with Connor McDavid. I wish I knew who Draisaitl would replace on the power play one if he played. So if that is Yamamoto, I mean, that sucks. I would expect it will be. So there goes like kind of your smash cash play, but still definitely a guy to keep in mind. And as far as cheaper plays go on the Edmonton side, Darnell Nurse has been seeing consistent minutes, and unlike some of the cheap guys that I mentioned earlier, he's a few hundred more, so he's not a direct comparison. But he has a legitimate like offensive defenseman history in juniors, and he's been shooting the puck this season. And given the minutes and given his shot floor, I think he should work his way in the power play time sooner than later. Unfortunately, it's not immediate. That could change at any minute because Chris Russell is not who you'd want on your power play two. And I think Nurse profiles as a nice power play two guy, especially with Sekera out. So anyways, he's worth a risk at the mid-3 price tag, especially in a high-paced matchup, and should he see the 18 to 20 minutes that he's been getting pretty close to recently. So going across the ice to Pittsburgh, as I mentioned, Edmonton's actually been playing pretty well. I do have concerns about their defense. Um, Overall, it doesn't jump out early in the season like it does for Pittsburgh. But Edmonton and Pittsburgh, they still combined for Pittsburgh to have the 7th best matchup on this 11-game slate. So while Edmonton is number 1, so Pittsburgh certainly in play. The lines as of Monday were Sheary, Crosby, and Gensel, that first line. But Hornqvist is with Crosby on the power play, and he actually led the team in time on ice in their blowout the other night. He put up 18 minutes 2 games ago as well. So, I think he's kind of the guy you'd want to look for, especially while he's relatively cheaper than his historical price. And on defense, Letang actually did lose some power play one work to Schultz. That's kind of still a fluid situation, so I'm uncomfortable recommending either one of them. As far as defense go in this game, I think Klefbom is a much better option, as well as Nurse, obviously. But if I spent up on this particular game, I totally would go with Edmonton, even on the road. I think they can do some correcting in a hurry, even against Matt Murray, who's not, Antoniemi's been the one who's gotten completely shelled. But even Murray hasn't been great. So I have no problems targeting him, targeting this Pittsburgh team, and targeting some aggression from the Edmonton side. So let's go to a bit slower paced game in Tampa and Carolina. There's not much here that I love. Um, I mean, Christ, you would be silly to auto fade Kucherov and Stamkos. And, it's going to be hard tomorrow when I'm locking my lineup going, okay, well, I have Edmonton exposure, I have some Ducks, and then not having any Tampa. That doesn't feel like it'll sit right with me. But, I mean, sometimes I think the risk here outweighs the reward. And the risk is that Carolina is one of the best defensive teams in the league. Um, so, Tampa by raw expected goals. Like, don't get me wrong, I don't use this as a diagnosis of who's going to be, the best play on a given night, but I use it to kind of set a guideline of, who do I want to start looking at and find values from there. Tampa projects lower given their seasonal expected goals creation than Buffalo against Detroit. They lower than Montreal, who's been an absolute tire fire, lower than Colorado against Dallas. And Dallas has been surprisingly great defensively to begin this season. So, I mean, when you're in the bottom of that bottom five, like, yikes. So, with that said, Kucherov is going to play 21 minutes if this game is close. They are likely to dress 11 forwards from here on out. Here on out being a relative term. For the foreseeable future, they roll out 11 forwards. That automatically kind of raises the floor of guys like Kucherov and Stamkos and even Nemestikov and like Tyler. Like, they're all fine plays. But here, given the expensive prices and that people are sure to pile on Tampa, I'm going to just kind of pay my respects to Carolina and look elsewhere for targets. And that said, I'm not interested in Carolina either. Tampa is just a legit good team, and so I will be directing my DFS thoughts to probably the more of the prior games, but also some of the games coming up. So next up, we're looking at Detroit at Buffalo. I had already texted, my dad and I were texting all game on Saturday, like how bad the Sabres were. They were getting schooled by the Bruins after just getting shellacked by the Vancouver freaking Canucks on Friday night. And so while that comeback was cool to see, the Sabres scored 3 goals to tie it up at 4-4, and then won it in 3-on-3 overtime. And what I thought was a completely garbage overtime game winner. I thought that was totally goaltender interference. But if you didn't watch, don't worry about it. So, with that that said, I just don't think you can play any Buffalo Sabres until they figure out what the hell they're doing. I mean, I'm totally out on Housley. He butchers the lines on a daily basis. He plays Risto for 30 freaking minutes a night. And yes, I understand you don't have options, but you're also not giving guys a chance. And the guys you are giving a chance, their names rhyme with Fat Rennison. Yes, Matt Tennyson is just getting oodles of minutes and power play looks, and it boggles the mind. So they're just a total mess. Their expected goals are horrendous. Their lines are bad. Eichel is fantastic, and he is a fine play against a Detroit team that is also not great. But I will be going nowhere close to the Sabres team. Defensively, you can look at Buffalo. Risto is still relatively cheap given his ice time and his workload, but Marco Scandella really stands out to me at a mid 3K price tag, and he has been like legit good. He's shooting the puck a lot. He's getting power play 2-time. He's killing penalties. He's playing alongside with Ristolainen. So we hit 27 minutes last game. Like, yes, that was overtime. And yes, they were really desperate in paring down their bench to try and find guys who could play hockey. So I would expect them to settle in closer to 23, 24. But definitely worth a look. So let's go to the Detroit side. Zetterberg is just, he will not die. Detroit just got manhandled by the Vancouver Canucks, though, and so while Zetterberg is still playing basically a huge allotment of minutes, I don't see it. Like, no thanks. Um, I don't love Buffalo, but I don't see playing Detroit on an 11 game slate. So Florida at Montreal. Montreal is quickly seeing their season just slip away. 1-6-1, I believe they are right now, and as a result, they're making some pretty epic changes. Um, Now centering the first line, Drouin will be with Arturi Lehkonen and Paul Byron. Um, I I don't know how I feel about this on an initial glance. Like, I love Lehkonen, and last year he showed the shot floor that really has me long-term upside, and his immediate DFS upside, of course. Um, and then Paul Byron's been like legit good this year. He's had over 4 shot attempts per game in the last 10 days, and Drouin is such a pass-first player that I don't expect him to be taking over the shots. So I think there's enough to go around for Lehkonen and Byron that I don't hate playing either one of them. Obviously, this devastates Pacioretty's value, and we'll see what their power play units look like. But I think that first line is the only place I would touch, and you're getting some decent value on those two, and Lehkonen and Byron if you need a cheap winger. Florida, they've been pretty good. I'm not gonna lie. Like, they're a team that I did not expect to be playing this well and this open, I guess. Um, but I think most of their strong projection goes into just how bad Montreal's been. And it's not necessarily like Montreal's getting dominated on the shot clock, but they're giving up so many dangerous chances. Um, so obviously the first line of Florida in Barkov and Huberdeau and Dadonov, they all play together on the first power play as well. So they're an elite play. I think there's still some meat on the bone in terms of their price tags. But, cash viable, maybe Huberdeau. But I think Trocheck would be the cash guy for me. Um, so, yeah, I mean, I'm not likely to have any Florida here. Even Yandel and Ekblad, like, I just don't think this is the perfect spot to play either one of those two guys in, given how many dangerous opportunities Montreal's been allowing. I think getting those highly skilled guys like Barkov into your lineups is probably a better option. So LA at Ottawa on a back-to-back. LA is. Um, I don't think there's too many plays here that I would be willing to look at. Even with Jeff Carter out, it looked like against the Blue Jackets on Saturday that LA hasn't really figured out who they want to fill in that second line center role. Nick Shore is currently there, but he got no power play time. And on the power play, Mike Camilleri stepped into his power play 1 role. So even a guy like Tyler Toffoli can't get a sniff of power play 1 time. For what reason, I don't know. But, you can try and keep going back to the Dustin Brown well, but I promise you it will bite you very soon. And Kopitar's price on Monday night is egregious, up at almost 7K. I mean, he's better than Joe Thornton, but he has the same sort of mentality, not a great shooter. And I think those percentages for him and Brown will slowly kind of come back to the mean, and you'll be left paying way too much for two guys who I think are slightly over the hill and just not great DFS plays in general. So I think Drew Doughty, Alec Martinez, they're fine plays. But Ottawa is so sound defensively that I just don't think it's all that worth it. Interestingly, looking at Ottawa's expected goals by game, they have 2 games in which they've allowed over 4 expected goals per 60, and then the rest of the games this season they've allowed 1.8 or below per 60, score adjusted and all. That is weird, I think. But I think going against an LA team on a back-to-back, LA needs to show more creativity and speed before I think they'll be able to break this trap. So, and then sadly, Hoffman, we're slowly losing him to more reasonable prices, up in the mid 5K, mid to high 5Ks at this point. And Erik Karlsson is a fine play. Um, he's been playing his normal minutes, and he has 6 assists in his last 2 games. I mean, he is crazy good. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise. I don't think anyone was telling you otherwise. And is always the top defensive option when he's on a slate and Brent Burns isn't. So by all means, go ahead and jam him in. But I think I'll be using more of the value defenseman here. So, but don't quote me on that. Next game, Calgary at Nashville. Jagr is in doubt. One of the weirdest stories I saw on Twitter but could not confirm. Jaromir Jagr aggravated an injury while sitting for a post-game interview. I don't know if Elliot Friedman messed up the wording on that tweet, but that's pretty impressive. If he managed to play an entire hockey game and then couldn't sit through a damn interview without, I think it was his groin or maybe his legendary ass. Yes, I said that. That's just what everyone talks about with Jagr. Don't laugh. Something in that area. So, I mean, I guess it makes sense that he could have, aggravated it while sitting, but it's not great. Calgary in general has not been playing all that well. So I think my top plays here are Josi and Subban for Nashville defensively. I think they're every bit as good a play as Karlsson is, and they're both playing on the power play 1 together, and you get separate 5-on-5 exposures as well. So I don't even hate stacking them. I think Nashville is probably my sneakiest upside spot for the night. And while Forsberg and Johansson they're really good plays, Arvidsson doesn't play power play 1, so that's really kind of a detriment to his value. I think I'm looking at Josi and Subban and maybe even rolling them in GPPs together. You can absolutely get there in terms of them generating 3 to 4 fantasy points just on their shots and block shots alone, and then you have that power play upside. So definitely don't hate that as a sneaky move on this Tuesday slate. So just the last 3 games. Nothing here really excites me all that much, but Vancouver at Minnesota. Minnesota is still super banged up. So guys like Jason Zucker are getting 20 minutes. I really like Zucker as looking at his, I know last year, 2 years ago now, he had one of the best 5-on-5 points per 60 in the NHL. And last year kind of got settled into that role with Koivu and Granlund, but never got power play time. So it was tough to play him in daily fantasy, but he was really productive, as a per minute real life NHL player. Now that he's getting that power play 1 time, I think he's worth a look. He has a historical trend of shooting a lot, but in the last 10 days, he's only putting up 2.5 shots per game. So it's not ideal. I would love to see more from him before I jammed him in. But a guy like Eric Staal, I think, is in play. He's pretty much shouldering the load by himself with his shot rate, and I think he's still not done. I mean, last year, obviously, he showed that he wasn't over the hill, like people said, when he kind of flamed out in New York after getting traded there from the Hurricanes. But I think Eric Staal is still there. Going against Vancouver, I love him as a play. And then Jared Spurgeon has been playing alongside Ryan Suter, and he is the more active of the Minnesota defensemen. So having him jump up in the play and get some shots on that and that power play upside, I really like him while he's in this high 4Ks to low 5Ks. So just a guy to keep in mind. Nothing on the Vancouver side really interests me. I mean, Bo Horvat is way too cheap at where he's been in the high 3s. But with that, I don't think Minnesota's the spot to target him. So Dallas at Colorado. Tyson Jost is out, which sucks because he just got put on that first line for Colorado. I'm not saying that he, I would have ever played him, but I think he could have been a decent value for you. No one they're going to replace him with is nearly as talented. So no thanks there. And then you have the obvious candidates on Dallas: Ben, Seguin, Radulov. Obviously, Sagan's the top play, but Sagan's been getting priced through the roof lately. You're getting no discount on him. So I think he's a secondary cash play at best. Um, and then Patrick Nemeth is still out for Dallas, meaning Julius Honka will step in and play power play 2. And he's been getting about 15 minutes a night. I like him just as a general player. His offensive upside is probably the highest among any of these like mid threes and lower guys. Obviously, Montour, if you need a savings on defense, like he's the play. But Honka could definitely be low owned and give you some nice upside here against a Colorado team that started to fall back to earth after kind of a hot start. So last game, Chicago at Vegas. Chicago played in Arizona on Saturday, and I mean, what can you say? They did okay. They won, kind of what you expect to do against Arizona, and now they go to Vegas, who is down 2 goalies, and they didn't even have 2 good goalies to start the year. So you can kind of see that they're between a rock and a hard place here in terms of who to put in net. That puts the Canes, the Tays, they're in play. Both of their lines are in play. But for me, Duncan Keith is where I'm going to go. I think he is a cash lock here. Power play 1, playing a ton of minutes. He's so involved offensively. He blocks shots. He plays PK. And his price simply does not reflect that he is one of the best DFS defensemen in the game for the team that has one of the higher expectations on the slate. I know offensively they haven't looked great in terms of expected goals, but I think Vegas has a cure for that. Guys like Patrick Kane, they're a cure for that. And Duncan Keith just picks up so many assists and puts the puck on net. I think he is close to a lock here. And on the Vegas side, I mean, when are you people going to stop playing the Vegas Golden Knights? But anyways, guys like Hunt, I think, are still in play, like playing defense, playing strong minutes. And I mean, geez, they're not great otherwise, though. So I guess Colin Miller, too, is kind of in that same role as Hunt, where get them before their price jumps to a point where like they're unplayable. Coincidentally, they played together, both 5-on-5 and the power play. I don't know how you pick between them, to be honest, but I think I would side with Hunt. And I guess really the other only note that I have is Shipachyov still has yet to play like a premium role for the Knights. So, I think you have to temper your expectations for him, at least until you start seeing him get, 15 to 20 minutes a night. He's down at 10. So despite playing with Neal on the power play, he's not getting that 5-on-5 role that I think you would want for cash games. So, and oh my God, if you people play James Neal anymore, Lord help you. He's like $7,000 playing on one of the worst teams man has ever seen. Like, yes, they keep winning. No, I don't care. So let that be my sassy end to this solo episode. In terms of the top lines that I want to stack on tonight's slate, I think I've covered some of the good cash plays. But I think in terms of lines, I'm looking hard at Anaheim, given, kind of seeing what they roll out there in terms of lines. I'm loving Edmonton. Whoever plays with McDavid, jam them in. And obviously, Tampa is that strong stack between Kucherov and Stamkos. They can light it up from anywhere. And then I think a bit more under the radar is that Minnesota 1 line, or whoever's playing with Stahl. You could even go Koivu, Zucker, and I think, well, no, don't play Chris Stewart or Anthony Stewart. I don't even know which Stewart it is at this point. I think it's Chris Stewart. Both of them are terrible. Both of them, I think Anthony Stewart's not even the NHL. So just don't play Chris Stewart despite the role he's getting. But stacking Minnesota, I love doing it. I think they'll still continue to be a good team. Their source of their defenses or their offense is Boudreau and a strong defense, and both of those are still intact. So while there's injuries, jump on the values while you can, and use those values to get those high-price studs in Edmonton and Anaheim, and some of the other guys I've mentioned. So that's it for me. Hope you guys enjoyed this shorter show. We certainly do not plan on doing many solo pods, but tonight was some pretty special circumstances. So I'm out to go see the Eagles play on Monday Night Football. So hopefully when you guys read this, Philly fans are happy, and hopefully I take down something in that 2-game slate on Monday night. So from me, from Doug, and from DJ. Have a good slate, everyone, and we will see ya.